Namaste. Shall we do meditation? Let me turn off these lights so that they are not shining into my eyes, and then we will begin the meditation. Just 1 minute. Om Pratarsmarami Hridi Samsphuratmattatvam Satchit Sukham Paramahamsagatim Turiyam Yat Swapna Jagara Sushuptam Abhaiti Nityam Tad Brahma Nishkalamaham Nacha Bhuta Sangaha. I meditate on my subtle body, called Linga Sharira. The subtle body, Linga Sharira, is that part of my body through which my life's experiences occur. In various Upanishads, It is given as an entity with 17 or 19 parts. Those two numbers are consistent. It is just how one counts. In the 19 parts of the Linga Sharira, there are 5 organs of perception, five organs of action, five prana, and 4 types of mind: buddhi, manaha, chittam, and ahankara. In some other Upanishads, the Linga Sharira is counted as 17. Pancha Jnanendriyaha, Pancha Karmendriyaha, Pancha Pranaha, Manaha, and Buddhi. In this way of looking at the count, the Buddhi includes ahankara, and manaha includes chittam, chittaha. Many times in the Shastra, this Linga Sharira is also called prapancha. Means the projection, and that word prapancha comes from pancha jnanendriyani, pancha karmendriyani, and pancha pranaha. Pancha, pancha, pancha. 5, 5, 5. So collectively, the Linga Sharira is called prapancha. I meditate on the significance of the name Linga Sharira. The word Linga means evidence, by which something is known. Lingyate, jnayate, anena iti lingam. By which something is known is called lingam. If the truth of something is known, then just the lingam can play an important part. As for example, we know wherever there is fire, there is black smoke. So wherever you see a black smoke, you know there is fire. Even though you don't see the fire, you know there is fire. So the black smoke is lingam for fire. I meditate on Linga Sharira. To understand the significance of Linga Sharira, I recall in my mind the distinction between Atma the Sakshi the Drik Swarupaha Chaitanya the awareful Sakshi witness, the distinction between Atma and Anatma, which is inert, Jadatmakam, I bring to my mind the basic distinction between Chetanatmakam Atma and Jadatmakam Anatma. By this, I recall in my mind that everything that I see is inert, Jadatmakam. There are not multiple sources of Chaitanyam. There is only one source, which is Atma, Brahman, Paramatma. And yet, I find that my Linga Sharira also seems to be conscious. All my sense organs, both the sense organs, organs of action, my physiological functions, prana, breathing, swallowing, digesting, etc. All seem to be conscious. My thoughts seem to be conscious. I see that even though my linga sharira is anatma, but it is conscious. Therein lies why the 17 or 19 parts of my subtle body is called lingam. Lingyate jnayate iti lingam, by which something is known which is a truthful indicator of something, like black smoke to a fire. The linga sharira is an evidence of something. Like a pan of water can get hot that is lingam. Whenever there is a pan of water, that means there is fire. Even though the pan and the water are hot, it indicates the true source of heat, which is fire. I meditate on linga sharira, because I know as anatma it is not the nature of Chaitanya. Of being conscious. The linga sharira indicates clearly the Atma, whose nature is consciousness. Jnanam, knowledge. The nature of knowledge. The nature of presence. The Linga Sharira borrows its presence, its consciousness, its functionality from Atma. I meditate upon seeing my subtle body as lingam. This should be clear to me. Once this is clear to me, and one should make it clear to oneself, then my entire life, whether I am sitting in meditation or not, when I am transacting, I am thinking, I am eating, I am working, I am talking, I am listening. The entire set of my experiences, I am aware of the fact that all my transactions, all my experiences indicate the steady, unchanging nature of myself as the Chaitanya Vastu, as the nature of consciousness, Jnanam. In this way, my experiences, my entire waking life is not wasted. It is a constant reminder of the nature of Atma. This is why the entire subtle world of thoughts and functioning of my body is called Linga Sharira. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. In the interest of time, we will not do the entire Dashamantras. We'll just do our usual beginning, and then we'll get into it, because there's a couple of things that I want to talk about today, and I need the time for that. So let's just do our normal beginning prayers and not do all the 10 mantras. Om Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavat Padam Shankaram Loka Shankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Parayan Sutra Bhashya Kritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punah Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bhed Vibhagine Vyomavat Vyapta Dehaya Dakshinamurtaye Namaha Kukarastvandakaro Vai Rukarastvanivartakaha Andhakara Nirodhitvat Gururitya Vidhiyate Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So in the last class, we were really focusing on an important verse, number 67, which points out that this complementary pair of my mind, in fact you can take it as exactly as a Linga Sharira, the entire Linga Sharira. So when we say the mind, the complementary pair of the mind and the world, you can take it as the entire pramata. Pramata means the entire subtle, the subtle vastu. The kind of like, I think a very good way to look at it is like a appliance. So the appliance is a very complicated one. It has some sense organs, it has some actions, and it has prana, it maintains itself. All kinds of things are happening in it. This is the appliance, very sophisticated appliance, but an appliance which is used to experience the world. So this pair of mind and the body, or the appliance and what the appliance interacts with, both form a pair which depend on each other. So the world is because you cognize it to be the world, and you cognize something because the world is visible to you. You remember the example we saw. You cannot establish your ability to hear until you hear something. So what you hear establishes the ear, and your ear establishes the world. So this is an important thing, and both of them are mithya. They are both just interacting, and both of them depend upon me as the sakshi. This was the message of verse number 67. So I would like to also make sure that we reference this concept of, the world and the mind, the world and the pramata is also given in the very beginning of Bhagavad Gita chapter 13. That I think you may be familiar with. And so the first few verses, 6 in fact to be sure, talk about this interlocking pair. And then from verse number 7 on, we start the distinction of this interlocking pair, the distinction between this mithya pair from the Atma Satyam. So verse number 17, which is the very famous one, which is called Amanitvam Adambhitvam Ahamsa Shahimsa Shanti Rarjavam. We have seen that before. Very important set of 20 different segments is the description of Jnanam. And it's a very interesting thing as a sidelight of that. I think you may have already known this. This is a distinction that is made, not a distinction, but a clarification rather, which is made by the commentators on the Bhagavad Gita. That how can you talk about the sadhana? You see, these are from numbers 7, 8, 9, 10, the 20 different values. Like amanitvam, adambhitvam, indriyartheshu vairagyam, janma mrityu, jara vyadhi, etc. These are sadhanas. How can you talk about the sadhanas to be sadhya? But Adi Shankara and other Sri Shankarananda's commentary on it, all very consistent. They say no. The sadhanas really indicate jnana. That if you don't have, it is like saying if you don't have these qualities, you don't see jnanam. And if you have these qualities, the jnanam is very clear. So from verse number 7 talks about the Atma. But verse number 1 to 6 talk about the very interesting pair of Anatma. And just I'll recite a couple of them. Idam shariram kaunteya kshetram mityabhidhiyate etat yo vetitam prahu kshetragya iti tadvidaha. I won't go any further into this, but it's interesting, worth exploring, and you should do that on your own, that the description of the first 6 verses is about the kshetra, the field, which is the world, and kshetragyaha, which is the jnata, which is the sukshma sharira, linga sharira. And they are both interdependent. Gita says the same thing. It's all very consistent. This consistency is something that you should really be aware of. That really speaking, no matter what text you are reading, what Upanishad you are reading, if it is Advaita, not Dvaita, but if it is Advaita Sampradaya, then really speaking, all these words from different Upanishads, from various different Prakarana Grantha even, and so on. So for example, I'll give you another interesting example of this. If you look at the Dakshinamurti Stotram number 1, and for those of you that have studied the Dakshinamurti Stotram, here Swami Maheshananji had pointed out the key of verse number 1, which is, we know the first verse. The first verse, the significance of the first word is Atma Pratyak Swarupaha. It is the Pratyaks. Pratyak means very near. How can you be any nearer than you being yourself? Their nearness and fartherness doesn't even matter. It is called Pratyak Swarupa. And the reason it is pointed out and why this is significant in this context is because Linga Sharira is important for me to see, because I cannot see myself as an object, even though I want to. I can't. Because I am the very person who is seeking. So it is an important example, Pratyak Swarupa, that so you will never see yourself as a manifestation. Any manifestation you have is your manifestation in the form of a Linga Sharira. It's just like saying, in that example, you may not be able to see the fire, but it doesn't matter because you see the black smoke. And if you see the black smoke, then you don't need to see the fire. You say, yep, there is fire. Similarly here also, Pratyak Swarupa means you don't see it, but you see its effect. That all of the Linga Sharira is resplendent with consciousness. And where does it come from? From me, from the Paramatma, from the Ishvara, from Brahman, which is Jivatma, all the same thing. Only one source of Chaitanya. Anyway, all I wanted to do was to point out that this section of the Karika, culminating in verse number 67, is really can also be seen in the light of the Bhagavad Gita, of the distinction between the first 6 verses of Anatma, the nature of the Anatma, and the 7 verses on, which is the nature of the Atma, Amanitvam Adambitvam. Anyway, so see that. So let us make progress, and I'm going to go rather quickly. So we've already finished now verse number 67. I will not, in the interest of time, I want to take about maybe 10 to 12 more minutes before I terminate the class and answer some questions. So in that time, I will not have time to go through the details of the next few verses, and I think we should keep on moving. But if you look at verses number 68, 69 and 70, Yatha swapnamayo jivo jayate mriyate picha tatha jiva ami sarve bhavanti na bhavanti cha. Yatha maya mayo jivo jayate mriyate picha tatha jiva ami sarve bhavanti na bhavanti cha. Yatha nirmitiko jivo jayate mriyate piva tatha jiva ami sarve bhavanti na bhavanti cha. So here Gaudapadacharya ji says that this is just an example of the three types of jivas that are given an example where they all come and go. There is no finality to it. So it's like a wave that comes out of nowhere, out of the water of course, and has some kind of a shape for a while and then disappears back into it. So that's not really any reality. That is just a dependent reality. It is just an expression of something else. It's the expression of the ability of the water to have some waves or not have waves. Doesn't matter. It is always there. So the different kind of jivas are given in here. One is called Swapnamaya Jiva. So Swapnamaya Jiva means that you also have some presence as a dreamer. So that's the first one, number 68. Then the second one is Maya Maya Jiva. So this is the one that is done by a magician. The magician can also say, you see that elephant in the clouds? And everybody says, wow, yes, I see that very well. It's just like that, Swapnamaya. The third one is Nirmitako Majiva. And so this is done by yogis who have the power to create a person. This is a very important and it's a very tough thing to do. When the yogis can do that, again, it is just make-believe. Ultimately, it is a make-believe. So 68, 69 and 70 talk about that. Then in number 71, it restates the two basic principles of Gaudapadaji's assertion. One is called Ajativada and the second one is Mithya Jativada. So one is, it is never born to begin with. This is what he's been saying. It's just a pattern. It really is never really born in that sense. There's no presence to it. And also when it appears to be there, so the Ajativada means that it has no beginning. We proved that all in the very beginning, very logically, that it is not Arambhavada, it is not Parinamavada, it is not in Vivartavada, it is nothing. And then, so this is called Ajativada. And then the other one is, but people can say, but I see it. How can you say it is not born? This is called Mithya Jativada, means that it appears to be there, but it doesn't. And so in verse number 71, he concludes, as Swami Paramarthananda says, that Ajativada and Mithya Jativada are really two sides of the same coin. So there's no big deal about that. Then in verse number 72, so he brings in an important similarity between the pattern generated by the tip of a burning stick. So this was all what we talked about earlier. And the very example of the firebrand that we saw. And so Alata Shanti. So And there he brings in the similarity of the pattern generated by Alata Shanti and the pattern generated by my mind. Okay, so chitta spanditam evam idam grahya grahaka madvayam, grahya grahaka vadvayam chittam nirvishayam nityam asangam tena kirtitam. So here he's saying that now that we have talked about the example of the firebrand generating a pattern, and it has all kinds of beautiful patterns to it, but it is not a separate vastu. Not a separate vastu. All it is a tip of the Alata Shanti just being twirled around. And so similarly, the world that we see, the experiences that we see, upon analysis, even though like a child who enjoys the pattern generated by an older brother or a sister in the dark room, and he says, wow, that is amazing, how did you do that? Similarly, we also experience the whole world, all the varieties of it. This is a much more sophisticated pattern generated by Ishvara. And we are saying, how can you, this is amazing world. And you say, okay, there is nothing in it. I can't believe it. I have to see it. But the fact of the matter is, if you analyze it, and this comes about when one has problems. As long as you are involved with it, you are working on it, and so on and so forth, there is no need to analyze. But if it gets too hot in the kitchen, then you have to think about something. So if problems occur in life, then you need to think about. And then you find this is like a dream. There is no reality to it. So here the comparison is done between the patterns generated by Alata Shanti and what is called Chitta Spandanam. Chitta Spandanam means that it is really the apparent movement of the Atma. And one thing I wanted to make sure, this is an important point. So let's make sure that we and then after that then we'll end with the class. So initially in Vedanta, so this is an important thing because in Vedanta also you see stages in learning, stages in understanding. So for instance, this is what I'm saying, this is what we're saying. In the beginning, we say there are two things involved. One is Drik and one is Drishya. Drik, Drishya, Viveka is what we are doing in the Drik, Drishya, Viveka text. So there are two things. So it looks like a duality. Are you talking about non-duality? Yes, we are talking about non-duality, but initially it is Drik and Drishya. So Drik and Drishya means, in fact it is very interesting if you want to look at the stages of understanding. For most of us, when we start this whole journey of understanding and learning and so on, there is only Drishya, there is no Drik. There is only Drishya. My experience is only. Do you talk to a normal, healthy person and you say, let us analyze this world. And so he says, okay, fine, let's analyze the world, but this is all various experiences. So there is no Atma at that point. Okay, so at one time there is non-duality, because in the sense that only the drishya is real. Then comes a point where you are given some instructions, and in those instructions there is drik and drishya, two of them. Ultimately, when you progress in the teaching, you find that the drishya is not on the same level as drik. It appears to be there, appears to be a competitor. This is what happens in our life. We try to meditate and so on and so forth, but then the world overwhelms us. And so it becomes a very strong, powerful competitor and actually overpowers us. But if you keep on in this journey, what you find is that you start with only drishya, then you go to both drik and drishya, and then finally it is only drik. The drishya is just a pattern. It is not a separate vastu. So it is, the observed is just a part of, it's just an expression. It's not even a part, it's an expression of the observer. So this is how it progresses, and that goes all the way up to verse number 73. And so verse number 73, and we will end with this, is yosti kalpita samvritya paramarthena nastyasau paratantra abhisamvritya syat nasti paramarthataha. So this duality which exists from the apparent empirical view does not really exist. It exists from the empirical view of the other systems. It does not exist. So there, I wanted to cover all those verses, but I think we did it adequately. And so from next time on, we would look at verses number 73 to 74. So let us say an ending prayer, and then I will answer a question from a student. Om Swasti Prajabhyah Paripalayantam Nyayena Margena Mahim Mahishah Go Brahmanebhya Shubhamastu Nityam Loka Samastha Sukhino Bhavantu Kale Varshatu Parjanyah Prithvi Sasya Shalini Desho Yam Kshobharahitaha Brahmana Santu Nirbhaya Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramaya Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschit Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Satgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om. So last week we answered a question from Virendra Singh and went over it at some length. And there was another question that Kirsten Strian from Italy had sent, which I didn't have time to answer last week, so I will do that this time. So let me kind of summarize her question. And it's an important question because it all these questions are important if they all occur in our own lives similarly, so we can all relate to it. So she writes a fairly comprehensive email, the first part of which says that I have been listening to all the things. So this is what makes this important question, because she's not a casual one. She has really followed all the aspects of what we have talked about in terms of creation, Ishvara's role in it, the dream, and the fact that there is no why of the creation, it just happens like that, and so on and so forth. And she also points out that the sports game example, because if it is only, there's no competition, there will be no tension, no dukkha which will be released. So there is a kind of like a leela, like a sport. So all those points were covered at some point or the other. And she cites it and said, yes, I know that, and so on. But then she ends it with this this one question, and then I will just spend some time just reading that, and then we will begin to answer it. So she says, what sense does it have to dream a life appearance and unlimited reflections, and all if the final purpose is to get rid of seeing it and to realize that there is only Atma? Isn't that an incredible waste of time and energy? And also, she says it elsewhere. Yeah, this is an important point, that there are atrocities, as she points out, with really a lot of pain and suffering. So it is not a sport in her view, because in sport people don't really suffer that much. You just have some competition and so on and so forth, but there is there's no real suffering in that sense. But we find that in our life there is a lot of suffering around the world. And so she says that I have a hard time talking to people about the view of Vedanta, where Ishvara is really not involved, and so on and so forth. Anyway, I'm just trying to paraphrase her. I may not be very accurately paraphrasing her. Okay, so those are the questions. So let's get into that. And there's a lot to be said here. So one thing I would say, and this goes back to what we were saying in the main class, that there are stages of understanding, from duality to non-duality, etc., etc. If there are stages of understanding, then there is a distinction to be made between what we understand ourselves and how we communicate it to others if there is a need to communicate, which there is often. There's a distinction between our own understanding and our need to communicate. I mean, I don't want to make a light of it, but it's like, if you are an adult, then you have to look at the age of the child as to what that child can understand, and not dump the whole thing at once. You have to really be careful about what is appropriate to communicate. The reason I'm saying this, Kirsten, is that it's very possible that you have a certain understanding, but when it comes to communicating it to others that want to ask about it, you have to take a different role. You may not even say all the things about non-duality and so on and so forth, you may have to fudge your answers because it is not capable. The other people haven't had this kind of a background. So I want to make sure there is a distinction between your own understanding and what your communication is with others. That can be on a different level based on, as we were discussing, there are stages of understanding. So please make that, keep that in mind. Okay, now let's talk about our own understanding. So what is said is that the nature of creation is such that if it's very simple really, this is the basic aspect of the whole thing. The nature of creation is there is some appearance in our life. Okay, so as you were saying that isn't this an incredible waste of time and energy? No, it's not a waste of time and energy because there is a experience of life. Whenever you're born, you have a tremendous amount of variety of experiences to go through. You grow as a child. There are purposes where your parents are happy to have a child. You are happy to have some parents. You're happy to grow and experience the world and learn about it. So there is progress to be made. There is a lot of varied experiences. So it's not a question of wasting of time or anything. All I'm saying is, very simply, there are two things involved. This is what Vedanta says over and over again. So for you, let us understand that. The two things are, life is an experience. Varied experiences, we know that. One thing is, if you don't understand the truth behind it, it can bother you. And if you understand the truth behind it, it becomes very pleasant. This is the fact of Vedanta. I would even say leave God out of this. And I think this is the nature of the whole world. That there is an appearance. There is an experience. And the experience has to be understood properly. What is happening? Why is it happening? All of that has to be understood. And you find that there is a truth behind it. And so the very example of this rope and snoke comes in. That it is possible that you mistake the rope and you suffer. But once you understand the truth that it is not really a rope, you don't suffer. So also in our experiences, what you find is there is a varied experience. And this is the nature of Maya Shakti. This is how it is. This is the only way the whole appearance is made. That the truth can be hidden. This is the Maya Shakti of the world. And if you want to bring in, this is how the whole creation is. And it was never started. It's not like God decided one day, okay, I'm going to do it this way and so on. This is the nature of the whole creation. This is the nature of God. That there is an experience, and if you understand it, wonderful. If you don't understand it, you may suffer. Okay, so this is all there is. You can consider it as a game, you can consider whatever it is, but this is the nature of it. And it's always been there like this. It's not as though it started. This is the very nature of it. It's been everlasting. That we are in that for our entire lifespans are meant to reach the point where we understand what is going on. Once we understand, we are happy. Until we understand, we are not happy. That's it. This is the nature of the creation. It then comes your question about Why does it have to be so violent? Good question. Very good question. So some things to be talked about in that manner. One is, this is not Ishvara's doing. Violence is not the creation of Ishvara. This is the creation per se. It is nothing to do with one person saying, I'm going to make it very violent. Nothing like that. In fact, the laws of creation are that as individual people, as individual jivas, we have the potential of getting ourselves into trouble and not getting ourselves into trouble. That's it. There is absolutely no God's intent. It is all really, this is an individual jiva to do that. Okay? And to give an example of this, I don't know, just in the last few days it just occurred to me, and Ishvara just gave me that thought. Okay? Consider this, Kirsten. These days, taking selfies is the rage. Everyone is taking selfies. Okay? Very nice. Because for the first time, you can include, you don't have to ask somebody else to take the picture. You can just be the photographer, and you can also become the photographed as part of the family. Especially if you have someone with a long arm. My younger son is very tall, he's 6'4", and he is great as a selfie taker. So he has these long arms and he includes himself. It really looks very nice. It doesn't even look like he's outside the thing. Beautiful. Now let me tell you something. If you Google it, at least before the coronavirus, this is now unusual, but before this occurred, there are several thousand people who die by taking their selfies. I remember this one case which was really mind-boggling. There's this young newlywed couple. Newlywed, just young, just got married. And the husband wanted to take a selfie in Yosemite on the edge of this rock. And he fell over and he died. Just look at this example. Now, one can say, what? He actually lost his life? Losing a life is not a simple matter. Do you know how many people you affect? His new bride, she lost her husband. Their parents, they were visiting from some place. They have spent a lot of time rearing this guy. There's a lot of repercussions of that. And this guy died. So one can say, how can this happen? How can God allow this? What is God going to do about this? Tell me. Is he going to put a netting that yes, you can fall down, but we won't let you die? Imagine, supposing there is some kind of a artificial netting. That means that depth cannot be done. What netting? How can that be? So here's the interesting thing. This is what really made me think about it. You take a normal, wonderful experience of taking selfie, and you can create havoc with it by your carelessness, by your stupidity. Really. And it's not just once or twice, thousands of times. I think we should Google it. I think I read that somewhere. It's an amazing statistic. Now, taking a selfie is not criminal. There is no criminal intent to it. Just by stupidity, you can create havoc. Imagine you introduce criminality to it. Now you have a multiplied way of having dukkha. All the done by human beings. God has nothing to do with this. So Swami Viditatmananda had given this example, and Swami Dayanandji was the original. We have all heard it from him. Take fire. The fire is a very important thing. And so if it is used properly, it is just like a selfie. It can be a very wonderful thing. It is necessary to heat things and so on and so forth. Fire can also be very destructive. The destruction of fire is just amazing. And it is all done by human beings. Where we don't clear the mountains properly, PG&E created this, 85 people died, human beings. The poor fire has nothing to do with it. It says, use me in the normal way. So as far as the intensity of problems is concerned, that shouldn't really we should not really bother this. So this is the way it is, really speaking. This is a creation, very beautiful creation, and it is such that it can create a problem for you, and if it does, look into it. And it may be that it doesn't have to be all solved in one life. You improve your understanding. It's a continuous process which might take several lives. This is how it is. This is your understanding, should be your understanding, it should be my understanding. How we communicate it to others, it all depends on us. I wouldn't talk like this to somebody, and I meet people every day who will say, just give me an introduction. And I don't say, there's no creation, no. I just say, this, that, I even bring God into it and so on. So that's up to us to see what we do. I think I have... one other thing I wanted to point out. This is also an important thing. In the view of the Vedanta, so two things. One is that Ishvara is the role of the individual and the Ishvara. The Jiva is the karma, has a responsibility for action. Whatever you want to do is up to you. If you want to use selfies for fun, fine. If you want to use it for killing yourself and creating a havoc to a lot of families, you shouldn't do that. But if you want to do it, what can I do? Ishvara's role is karma phaladata. He is the giver of the results. And the results are flawless. Flawless. There is no partiality, there is no incompleteness, there is no forgetfulness, nothing. It is complete. And it has to all consider what you've done before. Because we forget it very easily. I didn't do this. Yes, you did. You've forgotten about it. And so the role of Ishvara is a karma phaladata. That's the one thing. And the second one is the karma and karma phala are all temporary. There is no such thing as a permanent heaven. There is no such thing as a permanent hell. Because the results of the action can also become temporary. They are temporary and they will go at one time in time. And so even if so for example we and how one is a victim and how one is the cause of it, we don't know. Because it's very possible that one who are victimized in this life had done something to deserve the victimization. We don't know. All we know is that Ishvara is perfect in terms of as a karma phaladata. And number one. Number two, after you have had, like example, let me just say this. Suppose you were taking a selfie and you fell off a cliff. You did not die, but you broke a lot of bones. Okay? Then what happens is, in your stupidity, you are taken to a hospital and you recuperate over 2 years with all your broken bones and you become healthy again. Similarly, in this case also, if people do some stupid things, they are given some results for it, but after a life or 2 lives or 3 lives, we have no idea, they become okay again. So there is nothing permanent about it. This is also part of the srishti, part of the creation. There is just a process, and ultimately each one of us has to own up and say, I am responsible. I create the world around me. The world is not impinging on me. I am the one who is really doing everything. And if things are not going well for me, I deserve it. And I need to get out of it. This is what we have to do. So anyway, Kirsten, I hope that some of it makes sense. If it doesn't, please ask again. I'll be happy. And to the others, I will say I will not ask any more. I will not look in to see what other questions are there. But I would say this, that if you did have a thoughtful question that you've gone through, just like Virendra Singh did last week and Kirsten did this week, please write to me. And Virendra also, so we've been going back and forth. He was saying, are you upset, that you were saying go to temple only and this, that or the other. I said, no, but I had to make a point that you have to keep making some progress. Keep not doing the same thing over and over again. And if it appears like you are in an impasse, then please do something else for the time being. Anyway, that dialogue between questionnaire and my ability, if I know the answers, my ability to answer it can continue. So the point I'm making is, if you do have a thoughtful question like these 2 people did, please write to me and allow me to spend some time talking about it. And I will also look at your questions later after my second class is over to see if you had something that I should respond to, and I will do it individually, or if the question is really important, then I will do it for the whole class. Okay, all right, thank you, and we will see you next week. Om